Are you trying to establish your brand as a thought leader? Start a podcast, invite industry experts to be guests on your show, and watch your brand become the prime resource for decision makers in your industry. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Eric Vardon. He is the CEO and co-founder over at Morphio. Eric, how's it going today, sir?
Fantastic day. It's Friday. Logan, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I am excited to chat with you today. We're going to be chatting a little bit about the myth of success and growth, some of the things that folks might not quite understand yet, depending on where they're at in their entrepreneurship journey. I know we have a lot of sales and marketing leaders that listen to this show, a lot of executives, founders, CEOs as well. And so I think on your own entrepreneurship journey, your own business growth journey, there are going to be some lessons to unpack around success, growth. We're going to be talking about raising money and various things that are just synonymous with startup life. But before we get into that, Eric, I would love for you to share with listeners a little bit about your background, the journey you've been on, and what you and the team at Morphio are up to these days.
Absolutely, Logan. I don't know how much time we have, so I'll go with the short version, but long-term nerd. Been in technology and marketing a long time, serial entrepreneur. I love being in business and talking with entrepreneurs. And yeah, so CEO, co-founder of Morphio, which is a game-changing AI machine learning business in the marketing stack. So look forward to chatting.
Awesome, man. Well, the first thing I think we need to talk about, if we're going to dispel any myths around success and growth, then we've got to define some things. And that was your recommendation to a lot of entrepreneurs as we were chatting offline, is taking some time to define success and begin with the end in mind. Tell us a little bit about, some lessons learned there and what you are sharing with your peers now based on those lessons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all as entrepreneurs take our own journey, and when we're getting started, and everybody that's listening will read books or podcasts or watch movies or whatever we do to find pleasure and get our inspiration to be an entrepreneur. And it's fantastic, but that guidance has to come into a decision that every entrepreneur makes around what makes us happy, what makes you happy. So generally, that comes from within, defining values and morals around how you're brought up, and the way you manage people will ultimately be the way you manage your life in business and outside. So I'd always say, no matter what type of environment that you're in, whatever books you read, look within yourself and say, here's what I'm hoping to achieve with this business outside of the monetary or other success factors. What's going to make you happy every day, as well as when you go home. I mean, ultimately, being an entrepreneur is not something you turn off at 5 o'clock. It really sticks with you at all times of the day and all hours, and through difficult and exciting things. So if you're driving towards something that really and truly makes you happy from within, write that on your wall, stick to it, and live by it every day. And it's something that has worked very well for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice, man. As you look at, the landscape today in tech and just, startups in general, are there ways that you kind of break it up into, okay, there's kind of this path, there's this path, there's this path. As you mentioned on the personal side, it can be very nuanced, very dynamic. There's way more than 3 paths, right? But as you look at it, there are kind of some common tracks. Is there, kind of a starting framework to give folks who are earlier in their entrepreneurship journey some advice to think about
okay, this one versus this one versus this one, at least, painting in somewhat broad strokes.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I know that right now it's topical to talk about how failure is okay. And I absolutely support that. But I think to kind of close that deeper, for me, it's about making sure you make quick decisions. And so as much as it could be a failure, it's being comfortable with the fact that you may need to change or move on a decision that you made that day or even that hour. And that ability to be as agile as possible alongside your business, alongside your customers, one is definitely one way I would answer it. I think outside of that, it's just sticking true back to the goals that you have laid out. And as long as you're listening to yourself, your customers, your audiences, and the things that you focused on within your business, it's easy to start, but it's also more difficult to pivot as you need to, and being okay to say, listen, I need to make a change based on something I did yesterday. And to me, that's the biggest advantage today now, especially in technology or a startup in general. There's so many resources, there's so many forms of content, education, inspiration out there. It gives us an ability to try and test something, track it, and really understand if there's an ROI there. And if it is, do more. If there isn't, do less.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that topic of, okay, do I want to go and be super agile? I think of our own team here at Sweetfish. James Carberry, our founder, he is an idea guy. Sometimes it's tough for some of us on the team to keep up with the new ideas and trying things out. And I think we've definitely leaned into that. As we talk about startup life and entrepreneurship, it's tough to have any conversation without thinking about raising money. VC money in certain sectors is maybe easier to come by than it has been in years past. Again, I know I'm painting with broad strokes, but I think as we talk about different paths forward, you look at, okay, do we raise money? Do we bootstrap, right? And when do we, make that large pivot? And how does that affect the pivots that we might want to make, along the way? And from your background, Eric, having experience, bootstrapping companies in service-based businesses versus, raising capital, can you give some advice to folks in how to think about how they approach funding their business and maybe draw some distinctions between those two major paths a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And just topically, there's a great book by the founder of Moz called Lost and Co-Founder. And I think I would recommend it to anybody listening. But anytime you can manage your business for as long as possible and bootstrap it is going to, ultimately give you the most power. That being said, it really depends on the type of support that you have and the partnership that you have with both your people and your team. And so you may get quite lucky and you don't really need any outside resources, or like me, you've stumbled along the way in many businesses and got lucky and met some great people and have a team that, mitigates that risk. But most of us starting, and same as me, young, you want to move fast and, make mistakes and all those great things. And hopefully you can, work closely with people, and you don't need a lot of outside funding. That will allow you to keep control. And ultimately, most people will say that's the goal to success. But it really does depend on the type of business as well. And so really look at the model of your business, the amount of cash that is required. If you are in a startup and you need a bunch of money to build an MVP and you're going to not even realize any revenue for a few years, well, you're going to have to fund that somehow. If you're more in a service-based business, you're relying on hours and people and the time that is realized from that. Well, you can probably start real small, go out there and hit the pavement and bring in some sales and really use that cash flow to build the business as well. But as you grow in sophistication, there's always opportunities, whether it's acquisition or whether it's new technology, whether it's investments. I mean, there will be a need at some point for you, to look at the business and say, I need cash. Raising money is one, going to a bank, line of credits, pitching against your receivables for cash that's required is options. I mean, there's so many out there. But again, you need to really be strong around the team around you, great advisors, and also, realize that there are no magic answers, and just be really close to how you use that money. And, it does come to an end, and it does come with terms, and it does come with debt. Ultimately, to your point earlier, Logan, which I think is perfect, is, it seems glorious, but when the money comes in, ultimately, that's when you really become accountable to someone else. And if you haven't done that before, it could be quite risky.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there about, how you think about the type of business. Is it more service-based? Is it product-centric? Is it a mixture of both? Some of those factors to determine, what type of funding or any outside funding, do you need it or not? And what timeline will you possibly need it on? As you look at different opportunities or different avenues to secure those outside funding resources, are there some other factors that you recommend other entrepreneurs think about other than, the business model itself? Is it, looking ahead, how quickly can we grow, because based on what expectations are going to come along with that funding depending on the source? Can you speak to that a little bit more, Eric?
Yeah, sure. I mean, could get long-winded, but just to paint the picture, I mean, generally, if you're in, let's stick with tech and sort of the startup world as the theme, you're going to generally need to build a product of some kind, and you need to bootstrap that. And so generally you do that with your own pocket money, your own investment savings, et cetera, or you go to friends and family. And that's the best way for you to build something that you can go out and at least test with an audience. And I think that is first and foremost, is get something out there and get some kind of proof. Before you have revenue, angel investors are always going to want to know that people care about the product, that you've validated it in some respect. And, and every fund or every investor has a different thesis, which I can speak to, or a different way or the types of businesses that they like to invest in. But regardless, they're all going to want some kind of proof outside of, I know this is a good idea. I've been thinking about it every day in my basement for the last 3 years. 3, 5, 10, 15, whatever the number is, real people that can say, I love this product, it's a fit. Here's why, is one big advantage. The second is that you're going to always think about the differences in your product in terms of the way people are buying them versus the way you thought that they were going to buy them. And those are instrumental to answering those questions back to an investor. So from there, you're going to bring on some angel investment, probably in the 200 to 500, 750,000, maybe $1 million range. And from there, you get up into the seed funding. And as you get through the angel funding, you generally get into some kind of monthly recurring revenue that really proves that you've got some traction. And many businesses can stay within that, and they can cash flow and pay off their debts or convert their angel investors into partners. From there, you have some really big decisions because you've probably given away a couple points of the company, or 20, 30%. Again, it depends. So, don't count on my numbers. But then it really becomes, how much do you want to keep versus the upside? So your point, Logan, it's around cash flow projections and how really you want to scale. The biggest decision at that point is, do you need help to get to that next phase within your business? If you are planning to have and almost can prove you have a $100 million or $200 million business, and you haven't run a $20 or a $50 million business, you want to bring in somebody that is smart, not only around your vertical and your business, but can not only, again, add value, bring contacts, et cetera, but also bring money to make those things happen. So to me, that's the biggest key, is good money, good partnership. Someone that can add value is going to go a long way outside of just cash. That's going to help you, but still you have a lot to learn to grow.
Something you said there makes me want to take a little bit of a detour.
Okay.
What you said earlier about managing expectations with investors, I want to come back to that because I think that's a next stage here. But as you were talking about what you need to build to accomplish the next phase, again, I know this is going to be colored a little bit by your experience, and it's going to vary. So there's no one silver bullet answer. But in your experience, is there an area where a lot of CEOs or founders say, okay, we need to invest in sales, or no, marketing's got to come first, because if I hire salespeople and they don't have enough leads to work, I've heard that. One of the things we've looked at is, we really needed to beef up operationally more than sales or marketing or anything over the last several months. And we've been lucky enough to get the right people on the bus to help us in that regard. Any thoughts there on kind of misconceptions or typical perceptions on which function of the business to invest in, again knowing there's going to be some dynamics to this answer?
Well, the answer is everything. So I mean, it's the right amount of everything will always be your most successful path. So that comes into a small team of generalists that care about the business, that are probably going to come in with one area of expertise and learn a whole bunch of others. So to me, it's, directly, it's, you've got to build something that can function enough across all parts of the business to show proof. So you need some kind of tool or product or process that you're going to build. And again, you're right, it's variable based on the type of business, but you're going to need to understand the market. Generally, the founders and the CEOs or the original shareholders are going to be the ones, or at least one of them, going out and selling and grinding and on the pavement, talking to people, bringing that information back to whatever the product or process is, that balance between sale and product and marketing it can be done in a very small room with the right amount of people. To me, that proof point really brings it together. And you'll probably know within the business, and this is really where the guidance of money and investors can come in, is they're probably going to see the holes before you do, as well as the opportunities. Holes in the operation and opportunities within the market. That's why they'll ultimately invest, because you may be the best salesperson. You may have the best product. You may have the best operational process. It's okay if you don't have all of them perfect, but if you lead with one, you're going to feel it and they're going to know it. And ultimately, that's what makes a fantastic partnership.
That makes a lot of sense. And it kind of segues back to where I wanted to go that you touched on earlier, is the expectations of investors, what they're typically going to look for in those proof points, and some things that folks might not be, prepared for if they've never gone through this journey of seeking outside funding in their startup up to now. Can you speak to that a little bit? And then I think just as importantly is managing your own expectations and managing expectations with your investors through that next stage can be very critical to go from, okay, boom and celebrated, right? Seed round of funding to falling flat on your face. So if you can speak to both of those, and I think we round out the conversation with some thoughts you've got on culture as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So every step that I had managed to get into a little bit before has its own set of expectations, right? So family and friends, bootstrapping with your own money has a different set of expectations. They're buying into you as well as the angels. Ultimately, they're both in it for some kind of return, but they're generally not savvy investors. The angels will be, because they've probably done it before, but it's on a smaller scale. So they're a little bit more risk adverse, if you will. And they're interested in you, the story, and they want to get in at the start. So expectations hopefully can be managed, but they're generally looking for a win. And it's not nearly as prescriptive as when you get into the seed A, B's, and C rounds, because those are formulaic in exactly the type of input and output that they expect, whether it's a fund or private equity or family office. Again, you can do your research on those terms of the plethora of options out there. They all have their own thesis. And by thesis, they have their certain fund with a certain thesis. The thesis specifically states the type of businesses that they employ or deploy their cash into, the type of vertical, the type of entrepreneurs. Like, they're really prescriptive. They know exactly what they want. So they almost set the expectations going in of what they hope to achieve. And I would always say, do your due diligence. Understand generally what the type of return is that they're looking for, the type of equity, the type of, whether it's convertible notes, et cetera, or lending options. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different ways. So to me, it does really depend on where you are. So a few points on the expectations really, but I would say just communicate, over communicate, and really ask tough questions. Make sure that they're people that you fit with, but also have a personality, because you're going to spend a lot of time with them. You're going to report to them. You're going to have phone calls all day, every day. So make sure that you're on the same page and you have a good gut feeling. From the co-founder perspective, it really does go both ways. Know what you hope to get out of it, at each of those stages. You're not going to get a lot outside of money from the early phases of family and friends and angel. As you get up to the other seed rounds, that's really where you need to set expectations on what you hope to achieve. We just went through and raised our seed fund $1 million with a $5 million valuation on this new business. Great. We're excited about it. So we had certain things that we wanted with this investment at this round, knowing the experience that we have being through this before. So take into consideration what you've been through before and what you haven't. So I'm looking for now, as the CEO, in a new world of SaaS, in a new world of tech and AI, doing things I haven't had to do in a long time, and the business of sales has changed. So, to me, it's now, where are we going to go to next? What are the pitfalls that I'm probably going to run into? And how can I find a partner that's going to help with those? Right now, we're looking at having enough funds to enable some of the things that we want to do. And that's a balance between us and the investors now, as well as where we go. So definitely on both sides. Hopefully that provides a little bit more context.
Hey everybody, Logan here. Quick shout out to today's growth sponsor. Talkable helps e-commerce companies grow through targeted referral programs that leverage insights from your customers' behavior. Join others who've hit their sales goals and seen a 10x ROI on their referral programs. Talkable lets you segment your offers and personalize your messaging to different audiences, like new versus repeat customers or by geolocation. Talkable also easily integrates with the rest of your tech stack, having a low impact on site speed and navigation, creating a seamless user experience while helping you drive more sales. Learn more at growth.talkable.com. All right, let's get back to the show. You mentioned asking tough questions of potential co-founders, of investors, probably, of early stage employees as well. Can you give us an example of maybe one of those tough questions you are glad you asked?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could remember all of them now, but specifically, it's around, many times you won't have as much financial experience. You probably didn't work in a bank. You probably aren't an analyst. You're a co-founder. You're working hard. You know your business better than anybody, but you don't always know the logistics behind the scenes. So, whether they're acronyms, whether they're like safe agreements, what does that mean? I mean, I can think of a few that I'm like, okay, I don't know what that is. I write it down. I'll go home and I'll Google it after and pretend I know what's going on, or try to, multitask in the meeting and figure it out. That's a little bit naive. I mean, I think it's, stop and tell me and educate me on what that is. I'd love to learn more. I think if you're proactive and transparent around what you don't know, and the confidence that you have to stop in a room and say, this is why I'm here. I think I could learn a lot from you. Again, depends on where you're at with your confidence. I wouldn't have done that 15 years ago, and now I don't care if I don't know what it is. And I'm so curious. Tell me in the moment and let's have a conversation. And I think that is actually an advantage. So there's one example for it.
Oh, I love that. I think that's phenomenal advice. I mean, that's phenomenal advice for salespeople too, right? Like I one of my pet peeves for salespeople is they say, I don't know if but blah, 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 and then they just rattle off, and they're afraid to ask that question because they feel like it's going to make them look stupid. Same thing, you're trying to impress an investor or whatever that meeting is with, a stakeholder early. You don't want to look stupid. Man, the smartest people I'm around, Eric, are the ones who aren't afraid to quote unquote look stupid because they ask that question. It shows your level of comfort in your own skin. It shows your confidence in yourself, and it shows your curiosity to learn what you don't know. And it reinforces, hey, I know where I'm strong, and I also know where I'm weak, because no one of us is fooled, right? Investors included, that, oh, Eric, Logan, they've got their act together on all fronts, right? If they've been around the block or two, or a time or two, then they know that no one does, right?
Arrogance will kill you every time, and they'll sniff it out. So
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, just don't waste time there. I love what you're saying there. Speak a little bit, Eric, to getting the right people on the bus. You dropped some really good advice earlier in talking about folks that are willing to wear multiple hats, that are good generalists, that embody what we call at Sweetfish, owning the result. They don't just say, okay, this is my job and I take it from A to C, but they look at, okay, if I can't get it here, I'm gonna be resourceful. I'm gonna get scrappy. I'm gonna find a way to get it done. Any characteristics that you look for in building that team, or how you think about reverse engineering the culture that you want? Any final parting thoughts on the people that you start to put on the bus, or the rocket ship, hopefully, as it were?
I like the rocket ship analogy. I mean, it depends on the business, but regardless of how big or small or whatever, you're going to have people around you that you're going to need to trust and rely in. I've always had a rule of not hiring friends, only because it makes things awkward, or could make things awkward. So to me, that's one way to look at it. I mean, more specifically, it's having somebody or a team, 1, 2, 10, whatever, on the same page with the same type of OKRs or KPIs, or focus on the lighthouse, is, first of all, a really hard thing to do. So I would say, be okay and be comfortable with making people accountable, even in new ways that they haven't been before. When you're starting up, you don't really want employees necessarily punching the clock. You want them to think about the business and be excited and, feel the grind and have fun and all the things that come with it. That just takes time and experience. We would often look for people from small towns that, maybe they worked in a bar, they understand customer service or restaurant, or little things or cues where they really knew what it meant to not only work hard, but to invest their time into the output that they would expect. So to me, that's a big one. But yeah, always be willing to make decisions quickly, both bringing people in and letting people go. You never want to have to deal with it, but if you don't, it really can cause, negativity in the business, which is really hard to unravel, and it does, catch like the flu, and it's hard to get rid of. So I think that, now it's always a matter of having those open conversations, whether they be difficult, as soon as you can, and don't let people sit on things or stew on things. Be open, communicative, and, have some fun. And the more open you are and honest, I think people really react to it. That's how you enable people to do what they want and what they love. They're going to show up and work hard every day and have some fun.
That's some really good advice. And I love the example there of finding folks with very specific backgrounds or cues that could tell you, hey, they might be successful in this sort of environment or an early stage company. For more on this, one thing that really helped us as a team is Radical Candor by Kim Scott, kind of leaning into your advice there, Eric, of be ready and willing to set up a regular cadence of accountability, be ready to be able to communicate that. That is a big part of building an early stage team. It becomes less about the business and more about the people in most days and in most scenarios. We also interviewed a guest here on the show, kind of debunking some of the things around the commonly touted advice to hire slow and fire fast. We'll link to that in the show notes, because I think there's a whole other conversation to be had here around the hiring process, specifically within startups. So I'll encourage people to check that out. Eric, if anybody listening to this would like to follow up with you, stay connected, or learn more about what you and the team at Morphio are up to these days or in the coming weeks and the growth ahead, what's the best way for them to reach out, man?
Absolutely. 2 ways. So morphio.ai, and we're all on LinkedIn. So just head over to Eric Vardon, last name Vardon, V as in Victor, Ardon. Happy to chat anytime. Appreciate it, Logan.
Awesome. Way to make it easy. Eric, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Hey everybody, Logan with Sweetfish here. If you're a regular listener of B2B Growth, you know that I'm one of the co-hosts of this show, but you may not know that I also head up the sales team here at Sweetfish. So for those of you in sales or sales ops, I wanted to take a second to share something that's made us insanely more efficient lately. Our team has been using LeadIQ for the past few months, and what used to take us 4 hours gathering contact data now takes us only 1. We're 75% more efficient. We're able to move faster with outbound prospecting, and organizing our campaigns is so much easier than before. I'd highly suggest you guys check out LeadIQ as well. You can check them out at leadiq.com. That's LEADIQ.com.